I can see why the government have done that, because they wanted to quickly roll out this application to millions of people, partly because people don't really understand what Bitcoin is, to be honest. The idea behind Bitcoin City is that it's going to be an international financial hub. It will have 0% income tax, 0% capital gains tax, 0% property tax.
Okay, hello, Peter.
Hi,
We
Mark. Great to
talk.
be with you.
Good to talk to you. I looked it up. We are basically on almost on the other side of the planet right now. I'm in Abu Dhabi, and you're in El Salvador. And thanks for offering me to this opportunity to talk about your basically experience and your experiment, I would like to call it. You actually traveled to El Salvador specifically to basically check out how the whole Bitcoin topic is going. So I'm really curious to actually hear about it. So let's kick this off. And yeah, what are your basic findings so far?
Thanks, Mark. Well, I got to El Salvador on the 6th of November, and I've been based here since then. So, coming up to 3 weeks on the ground. I'm here primarily to attend the Adopting Bitcoin conference, which is a really big conference that took place in the capital. There are about 600 people taking part, flying in from all over the world. I was representing the Free Private Cities Foundation there and giving a speech about the link between free private cities and the values that Bitcoiners tend to hold. And that was really well perceived, and I've been able to make some really good connections through that. But as you mentioned, another important goal of coming to El Salvador was to experience for myself as a Bitcoiner what Bitcoin legal tender means in practice in this country. I'm not someone that's been in the Bitcoin scene for a long time. I got involved in 2017 when I was working in China, but I still have had quite a few years of thinking about how Bitcoin can function as money, and of seeing developments like the Lightning Network go from strength to strength. And so I was really curious to see how a small Central American country would be able to deal with some of the issues that we've been within the Bitcoin community talking about in theory for a long time, but not really implementing in practice. And so one of the things I was keen to do as soon as I got off the plane was to get out there and try and spend Bitcoin. And I'm happy to share a little bit about how that experience went, if you'd like.
Yeah, I'd love to. So let's just dive into it. So, I mean, for me, perhaps the first question is regarding what you just mentioned, legal tender. What does it actually mean in theory and in practice? Because we all know um, we have stores, shops all around the planet that do accept Bitcoin. So if one is lucky and one wants to spend one's Bitcoin on some consumption product, one perhaps can do it already. So what is actually the difference once Bitcoin becomes legal tender?
So officially, what it means is that if you're a business operating in El Salvador and people want to pay you in Bitcoin, you are supposed to accept Bitcoin. And what that means in practice, though, is kind of different. Obviously, this is a developing country, so the extent to which these edicts that come from the government permeate across the entire economy are more limited than they would be in, say, a European country or in North America. But as a developing country, you have here many international businesses that operate, particularly in the capital, like San Salvador. You've got the financial system, the banking system, you've got medium-sized businesses, and then you've also got a load of small independent businesses that are really operating within the cash economy. And so there's this big spectrum. And as you might expect, the businesses that are like the big chain stores, the big department stores, certainly if you go to any international fast food chain in San Salvador, those kinds of businesses are accepting Bitcoin and have got systems in place that are often quite efficient for accepting Bitcoin and processing Bitcoin payments. When you get further down the kind of the economic spectrum, you see that people tend to have mechanisms for accepting Bitcoin. The most common is the government wallet called Chivo wallet. But then when you go like further down to like very small independent businesses, really people are still predominantly using US dollars. I have been able to spend Bitcoin. For example, I went to Centro Histórico, which is the like a central market area within San Salvador, and there were many hawkers there that were selling drinks, and I was able to spend Bitcoin there by making transfers to the Chivo wallet. And when you go out to places like El Zonte, where there's already a Bitcoin community, you can spend Bitcoin there. But most other people, I mean, they're operating within the cash economy, and that's the reality, and that's kind of what you would expect, I think, at this early stage of the legal tender law being in place.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you mentioned Chivo wallet. So that's the governmental wallet, but I guess it's not mandatory to use that. So we are talking about Lightning wallets right now. So have you got any experience with different wallets so far?
Yeah, I do. So within San Salvador, there are primarily two wallets being used. The first is Chivo wallet, and the second is Ibex Mercado. The Chivo wallet is the government-controlled app that was used to provide $30 to any Salvadorian with an ID number when the Bitcoin legal tender law came into effect, and that was on September the 7th of this year. So that app was downloaded by, I think it was about 3-4 million Salvadorians, because they had an incentive to download this app and redeem their US dollar payment. And that means that the app is now on millions of Salvadorians' phones. So if you look at what's happening in stores like McDonald's, which have got a very big international footprint, they don't want to have to rely on the government wallet. So they have their own platform set up independently. And then a lot of other businesses I've noticed are using Ibex Mercado, which is not the government app, but it is a new app that's exclusive to Salvadorian citizens. And I found that app, because it doesn't have certain features, it doesn't have certain centralized features that the Chivo wallet app has, is actually pretty seamless in terms of making payments. But the Chivo wallet, the way it works is that a lot of the transactions that work on Chivo are not actually going on the Bitcoin blockchain or even over the Lightning Network. It's only when the Chivo, they're being settled via the internal ledger of this large government app. So there are these kind of release valves on either side where people can withdraw US dollars from the Chivo app, or they can withdraw Bitcoin directly from the Chivo app by going to a special part of the app that allows you to transfer to outside wallets. But actually, the vast majority of payments are taking place via this centralized ledger within Chivo, in a way that's kind of analogous to the payment systems you see in China, like WeChat and Alipay, where there are centralized servers settling back and forth. And what this means is that Chivo to Chivo transfers can be completely free. You don't have to pay the 0.3% that you would pay when you go via the Lightning Network and pay fees to Lightning nodes. And it also means that you can transfer seamlessly between US dollars and Bitcoin. And the government has a stockpile of Bitcoin and a stockpile of US dollars so that it can make the payments to people that want to withdraw. But in a way, it's kind of operating analogously to a bank, perhaps a fractional reserve bank. That's what some people say. We're not really sure the extent to which the Bitcoin is fully backed, on the app is fully backed by real Bitcoin, or the US dollars are fully backed by US dollars. There's this kind of transparency issue there, I think. I can see why the government have done that, because they wanted to quickly roll out this application to millions of people. But it does mean there are certain things that are potential risks about the model, operating with a kind of backing of the currency rather than actually functioning directly on the Bitcoin network. And there are also some compatibility issues with Chivo and other wallets, which I can talk a bit about if that's of interest.
That's certainly of interest, but that brings quite a few questions to me. So perhaps one of the first questions would be, how easy is it to then basically get your Bitcoin on, say, offline or onto a ledger? Is I guess that should be no problem, right?
It's no problem if your situation is that you think you got the government Chivo app, you've got your $30 there, or you've got some additional payments from transactions, and you want to transfer those to, say, Blue Wallet, custodial, like other Lightning wallet, or any other kind of wallet, Electrum, whatever it is. There are mechanisms within the Chivo app to make a direct transfer. The on-chain transfer is very simple. The Lightning transfer, you have to click a couple of extra buttons in order to make the transfer happen, and it will go out of the wallet. And for someone that's got the app, it's no problem. But the thing to flag is that there seems to be a kind of compatibility issue with Chivo and other wallets, whereby transfers out of Chivo or transfers to Chivo take about 20 seconds to settle. Sometimes that could be longer. And when you're operating with Ibex Mercado, the other Salvadorian wallet, or you're operating with any other kind of Lightning wallet of Satoshi, Blue Wallet, the Lightning payments tend to be pretty much instant. The reason I bring that up is because it means that there's no issues getting your Lightning out of your wallet to another wallet if that's something you want to do. But what it does mean is that if people want to pay to someone who only has a Chivo wallet, then they have this quite awkward process whereby they have to make the transfer. They show the person on their phone that it's gone through, and then it takes about 20 seconds for it actually to be received on the other person's wallet. And my concern about that is that partly because people don't really understand what Bitcoin is, to be honest. They don't really understand the difference between Bitcoin and Chivo. They certainly don't seem to, there certainly doesn't seem to be widespread understanding of what the Lightning network is compared to the Bitcoin main chain. My concern, I think, is that because this has been rolled out, people make the association in their mind, oh, doing Bitcoin payments, it's awkward. It takes 20 seconds to go through from an outside wallet. I'm just going to do US dollars or cash. And that is a concern of mine. But I don't think there's much of a concern regarding the case of, oh, I've received my remittances. I want to cash this out in US dollars or Bitcoin. That waiting 20 seconds for that is no problem.
Yeah, so you took some questions already away from me, but one question I wanted to ask is, what's your impression in terms of the sophistication of knowledge of the public of Bitcoin? Because as we know, it's quite a complex topic. So you already said it. It's probably not that high yet. But following up that question, are there initiatives, do you think, that basically try to alter the general level of knowledge in that regard? And do you see some kind of a dynamic in this regard?
Yeah, there are actually. There are initiatives that are out there. There's a charity here, an NGO here called My First Bitcoin. I've been connecting with a few people working for that NGO over here. And what they're doing is running classes for people, small classes, 3 to 4 people at a time. And they're teaching them how to use the basics of Bitcoin, how to operate Chivo wallet, what the difference between a custodial wallet and a non-custodial wallet is. Simple things that allow people to use Bitcoin in their business and take some simple protections regarding how they store their Bitcoin and how they process Bitcoin payments, how they provide employees access, things like that. There's also Chivo themselves, and I don't have a lot of detail on what exactly is being done, but I have noticed a Chivo presence in, for example, the historical city center of San Salvador. There's a Chivo stand where people can go if they're interested, if they have questions about how to use the Chivo wallet, how to transact in Bitcoin. I understand that they can go to people that are wearing the Chivo t-shirts and ask questions. And I've seen them around in San Salvador in a few different places. And one other thing I would point to as well is the Bitcoin Beach project down in El Zonte. For those people that are listening and unaware, this is a project that's been in place for a couple of years. A company, Mission Sake, has been involved in investing there, and Galloy Money has also been was responsible for setting up a Bitcoin Beach app. So we're talking about apps. I didn't mention Bitcoin Beach because in San Salvador, I've not seen it used myself. It probably is being used a bit, but it's essentially a community wallet that is being used in this small beach community of El Zonte. By last data I saw, it was about 40 or so businesses, and this wallet is being used down there, and that also has its own kind of peculiarities. And the people down there, to speak to the education question, are also really working with the local population to educate them about Bitcoin. And they've also provided them some practical help last year there was the government lockdown due to COVID, and many people had a slump in their business, and they actually used this Bitcoin Beach app to send a kind of UBI payment to people to get them through the pandemic. So I think there's a really good relationship down in El Zonte to between the local residents and the people that are running Bitcoin Beach.
Okay, interesting. Perhaps just following up on basically the perception of the public in regard to Bitcoin. So I think I could imagine most of the public wasn't, as we already touched on, very well aware about the ins and outs of Bitcoin. But so then in I think September 7th, you said basically the public was credited $30 of Bitcoin, which probably already has risen in terms of USD since then. I'd guess 30 to 50%, something around that. So how is Bitcoin perceived? Do you think is it primarily perceived as medium of exchange, or which would be my guess, because obviously since Lightning Network is enabling that, or actually are people already thinking of it as some kind of store of value already?
I think there are people that I've spoken to that are thinking about it as a store of value. Some taxi drivers, for example, I'm trying to ask people about Bitcoin when I go from place to place, and some taxi drivers kind of really get the idea that this is inflation resistant money and that this is something to put your savings in. I would say my feeling among talking to street hawkers or hotel owners, people that are using Bitcoin down in Bitcoin Beach, is they see it as another kind of medium of exchange type money. I think most people have heard of the general arguments about inflation, but there's just a feeling that like this is the kind of natural progression of money. One woman working down at a hotel said to me, "Oh no, we used to have gold, and then we had notes, and then we had checks, and then we had credit cards, and now we have Bitcoin. Why does it have to change all the time? Why can't we just stick with this?" And she was 72, and so she'd seen a lot of changes in, she'd also seen the colon to US dollar transfer in 2001, because of course El Salvador is now has been a dollarized economy for 20 years and without its own currency. So that was a key factor in making the change from, introducing Bitcoin. They didn't have to worry about undermining their own currency in doing it. But I feel like there's always a bit of resistance to change. But the woman that I spoke to, and I had similar sentiments expressed to me by various people, but we went into the deepest conversation, I think, with this lady. She was kind of actually fairly accepting of Bitcoin and doing it in a kind of a playful way, saying, "Oh, why does it have to come along, all this new stuff?" And I was kind of putting a few counter arguments to her, saying, "Well, so do you like the system with the US dollar at the moment, where you don't get any interest rate? You don't get any interest on your money because interest rates on the one hand are so low, and actually only 30% of this population have a bank account. So most people they're forced to stay in this cash economy, and a lot of people are excluded from the whole financial world." So I was saying, in a country where there are 1.6 iPhones per person, smartphones per person, and only 30% of people own have a bank account, I think it makes sense that you would try and take advantage of that technological access that people have. And Bitcoin provides a way of giving people access to digital money, both in terms of making everyday transactions, but also in terms of some really key areas like remittances, where people have had to go to Western Union, pay really high fees to get remittances from families. There are about 2.5 million Salvadorians living overseas and only 6.5 million people here. So it's a huge remittance culture. It's 22% of the country's GDP comes from remittances. So this is also kind of changing that game a little bit and allowing people to make direct transfers back to people whilst cutting out the middle man organizations like Western Union.
Wow. Yeah, I think that's a big argument, and I think that's a pretty obvious one, which probably the public can get pretty fast. But just going back to perhaps the medium of exchange versus store of value discussion for a second. I mean, perhaps I'd say in our perhaps more Western view or view coming from culture with more stable currencies, we have perhaps more the traditional Bitcoiners view, which would be Bitcoin probably will appreciate a lot versus fiat currencies in the coming years. So perhaps give me the argument for why should one use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange with this kind of anticipation? Because you are doing it. Are you doing it just as basically as an experience, or is there basically a deeper thought process going on when you personally spend Bitcoin in El Salvador?
There's certainly an element of I'm not a neutral party in this. I'm someone who's really interested in Bitcoin and I'm trying to learn about it. So that's a key personal motivator. But if I were someone that was coming to El Salvador and I wasn't interested in Bitcoin, the reason that I would look at it is that if I want to make transactions here in US dollars, I'm forced to either use cash or use or pay via MasterCard or Visa. In the case that I use cash, I have to withdraw the money from the bank, and the bank will probably have an exchange rate that's slightly worse than the market exchange rate. When I've been withdrawing cash, I've had to pay 3.5 US dollars per withdrawal. So I've been doing larger withdrawals at the ATMs. ATMs aren't necessarily they're fairly common, but I've tried about 4 ATMs and about half of them work with my card, half of them don't. So as a foreigner coming here, actually getting the cash out is a slight issue, and you are paying some fees getting the cash out. With Bitcoin, you are settling the transaction immediately, and on the Lightning Network at the moment, you're getting consistently fees that are below 0.3%. So those are paid at the moment, those are paid by the customer. So you pay a few extra sats on the end. So, go to it's not very much money, 0.3%, so it doesn't tend to really affect a decision making. But if I'm to go to a shop and try and pay in credit card, the merchant's going to end up paying probably about 3% on that end. I've looked at online statistics say that it's sort of between 1 and 3%. I think 1 is really at the very low end. But most merchants here are saying, yeah, it's actually costing me 4 or 5% to take any transaction on via Visa or MasterCard. So at the moment, it's costing businesses more to accept Visa or MasterCard payments. There's also the exchange rate issue. You get a slightly bad exchange rate sometimes when you make card payments as a visitor to a country. And Bitcoin just allows you to circumvent that. And I do think that after a time, because these are quite subtle changes, like 3 or 4% versus 0.3%, it's going to take a while to overcome the initial barrier to entry, the initial learning curve. And I don't think it's very difficult to learn to use Bitcoin. In fact, I was able to get a hotel set up with a Lightning wallet for the first time down in El Zonte. They were pretty open-minded. They only had on-chain transactions. And I said, people are going to pay less if you do things on chain because they're going to have to pay, a flat rate at the moment of about 40, 50 cents. But that's going to go up. That could really go through the roof, and that could just stop your payments working entirely. And they were quite open-minded. And I said, look, if you want me to set you up with a Lightning wallet, we can do that. It would take 2 to 3 minutes. And they were like, sure, yeah, we'll do that. And I sat down with the guy, just worked out, told him which app to download. I told him some stuff about how to keep his private key. And then within a few minutes, I was able to send him a few dollars on the Lightning Network. And now whenever a customer comes in, he can just show them this wallet. After he's got a certain amount of on his wallet, he can then transfer that on chain if he wants to transfer it to the hotel wallet. And it's quite a quick process. But again, you need people to actually do that know how to do it, that understand Bitcoin. And there are some apps that make it really simple. But the problem with the simplicity is that you often don't really understand what you're doing. Wallet of Satoshi is another wallet I've seen used a bit around here, actually. Down in El Zonte, I've seen that used. And that's a very simple wallet that doesn't have doesn't give you a seed phrase even. You basically just trust the wallet to hold your funds and then transfer it out when you've got a certain amount that you feel like you're uncomfortable having it on the wallet. So there is a barrier to entry, but I can see that there are economic incentives, both for me as a tourist here in El Salvador and also for the businesses here in terms of the fees they save by using Bitcoin versus traditional fiat money.
Hey, super interesting. So I think you're doing great jobs there, actually helping people to handle Bitcoin, and I think that's obviously great. So I'd like to encourage everybody else who listens to this interview to follow your example, Peter. Yeah, let's switch gears a little bit. So what has been popping up quite a bit on Twitter, and I have just briefly looked at the project, but I'm sure you know more details about it. Bitcoin City. So what do you know about Bitcoin City? What is this all about?
I think Bitcoin City took a lot of us by surprise. It was announced on Saturday. Essentially, a lot of people were together at the Adopting Bitcoin conference, the Latin American Bitcoin conference, La BitConf in San Salvador. And a few of us received a mysterious invitation to an event taking place that was hosted by President Bukele. And we weren't told where this event was going to take place. We were going to get picked up and taken on buses to the location. And we expected this to be a dinner for speakers at the conference, actually, because we were the speakers were the first people to get this invitation. But when we arrived, it turned out to be this really quite large scale, I would say 500-600 people nightclub type environment where there were people coming around with drinks, there was music, there was this caption on the screen at the front that said "Feel the bit" rather than "Feel the beat," Bitcoin themed. So we knew something was going to happen. And then around 9 o'clock in the evening, President Bukele appeared on stage and he made this announcement that there was going to be a new project launched in El Salvador called Bitcoin City. The idea behind Bitcoin City is that it's going to be an international financial hub that will attract Bitcoiners from around the world. It will have a very liberal tax regime. It will have 0% income tax, 0% capital gains tax, 0% property tax, only 10% VAT. And it will have a high degree of autonomy. It will have its own mayor. And it will, interestingly, be financed by a Bitcoin bond, which is something that the government of El Salvador have been working with Blockstream to issue. The Bitcoin bond is going to try and raise $1 billion in revenue that will be used in part in a Michael Saylor type move to procure Bitcoin and in part to fund infrastructure for the city. So they're trying to attract traditional investors that will come in and buy the Bitcoin bond, and they will receive a coupon of 6.5% on the bond, and it will be paid back in 5 years is the objective. And the goal here is that because most of the investors, the El Salvadorian government, a lot of people expect Bitcoin to do very well in the next few years. The fact that you have part of the bond as exposure to Bitcoin will mean that more traditional investors, perhaps, that want to get involved in Bitcoin and also see Bitcoin as having a good future, will put their money into this bond. Half of the bond will go and support infrastructure in this new city. They talked about having a port. They talked about having rail connections, building the roads within the city. And part of it will be going into a direct Bitcoin investment. So it would mean, in theory, that if Bitcoin doubled in price, plus a little bit to pay for the coupon over the next few years, then the bond would pay for itself without any return being needed for the infrastructure. But then there's also the element of we're investing in physical infrastructure, and that will yield a return to that will have the potential to yield a return to the bondholders as well. So it's a mixed instrument. It's being issued on the Liquid network, which is a Blockstream federated side chain. So a way that you can do extra things like issue securities, but have them purely denominated in Bitcoin. So this is an interesting aspect of the bond as well. And as someone that works for the Free Private Cities Foundation, we're really interested in this. We're having conversations at the moment where we're we're trying to find ways in which we can get involved in this project because we think it's a really exciting initiative. And I think a lot of us are in the stage where we're looking around, we're trying to sort of work out what's going on with the Bitcoin City project. We're intrigued. I'm planning on making a visit to the area where that has been proposed. It's over in near to the Gulf of Fonseca, next to a Conchagua volcano, far in the east of the country. And I'm planning on making a visit there to do a bit of a fact-finding mission this weekend. So it's a pretty interesting announcement.
Hey, that's super interesting. And I also had to think about Michael Saylor, as you pointed out. So it's a big project. Looking forward to follow it. But just following up shortly on that, you mentioned you are involved in free private cities, so you have some kind of expertise, I guess, to assess such kind of projects. I mean, for me as outsider, basically the first question which comes up, and I think that probably also holds for the project for free private cities, is okay. So what are the legal risks? So, I mean, President Bukele now says, okay, we've got this tax regime, or we are going to plan basically an autonomous region or city with autonomous tax regimes, as if I understand it correctly. But what if politically the political landscape changes, and how safe is this in the medium or long term? So that would be for me the very first question which pops up. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do, and it's exactly the question that we started asking as soon as this project was announced. What I'll say is that that is a question that lots of investors are going to be asking, because rightly or wrongly, the reputation of courts across Central America, I think, including here in El Salvador, is not quite as strong as it would be if you were investing in places like Britain or Europe, North America. It's one of the aspects that we've been, in the meetings that we've been having so far, we've been raising and saying, are there ways in which investors coming in can feel that there is more security from a legal standpoint regarding the future of Bitcoin City? I can't say too much about what we've been looking at so far, but what I'd say is that in Honduras, where you have the zones for economic development and employment, the way in which they've been able to provide reassurances to investors is to make a constitutional change whereby the basic rights that people are entitled to that invest in ZAs require a constitutional amendment, so a 2/3 vote in the Honduran parliament in order to change. And then another thing that the ZAs have done is they've signed an international agreement with the country of Kuwait that provides a kind of protection for these zones and investments within them within international law. So there are additional things that governments can do that can provide stability and reassurances to investors. And from the announcement we had from Bukele on Saturday, these kinds of things weren't addressed immediately. You don't go into the full plethora of possible considerations, but it is something that we are really interested in, that we've been raising in the local conversations we've been having. And our hope and perception, to be honest, so far is that people here on the ground are very perceptive to making changes in the direction of providing additional legal security. And so I'd say let's speak again in a few months, and maybe I can give you a bit more concrete detail on how those conversations have gone.
Great. Yeah. I mean, that sounds definitely interesting, and we're definitely going to follow this developments. Closing, any specific remarks you want to share with us? What do you think? Where are the developments going regarding Bitcoin in El Salvador? Any other topics you want to just briefly address?
I think as a general closing comment, what I'd say is that my general feeling in El Salvador is one of optimism. I mean, I'm not someone that has got a deep understanding of the country and the local culture. I've only been here a few weeks, as I mentioned. But if I compare how I feel when I'm reading the news in Europe, I've just come from Europe, and it was great to meet you while I was there, and Britain, to the news over here, and what's happening here on the ground, I feel like things are moving forward here. And it's early days in terms of Bitcoin. I mentioned some of the difficulties that people are having and the uptake being like not too vast at this stage. But I also mentioned some of the really positive things and the fact that lots of businesses have responded and have been able to introduce Bitcoin payments. And I do think the message is gradually getting out to people. And as someone who thinks that sound money is absolutely key to economic progress and to providing economic opportunity across the socioeconomic spectrum, I'm optimistic. And I think that this is a really great place. I would encourage people to come and visit El Salvador. A lot of people have expressed concerns about the safety of the country. I've not personally felt unsafe at any point during my visit here, and I've found that the people here are incredibly welcoming and open-minded. Like the guy that I said to him, "Should I set up a Bitcoin wallet for you?" And he was like, "Yeah." Not many businesses, I think, in Bristol, where I'm from, would just do that on the spot. Uh, so I feel optimistic about this place. I'd encourage people to come and check it out for themselves and make their own judgments. But I can definitely see myself coming back here and doing more work in the next few months.
Brilliant, Peter. Thanks so much. Where can we follow you? I mean, I follow you on Twitter, but just perhaps share your Twitter handle or any other sources, because I think your thoughts and insights are very interesting also for general public.
My main social media outlet is Twitter, and my handle on there is Peter MI, the letters MI Young. So Peter MI Young on Twitter, and then I also manage the Free Private Cities Twitter account, which is at Free Private City. And you can find us on Twitter. Follow us, drop us a DM, let us know what you think about the project. We're really keen to engage with the Bitcoin community and the hard money community in general around the world.
Brilliant, Peter. Thanks so much for your time, and we're gonna hook up another time, I'm sure.
Wonderful. Great to chat, Mark.
Take care. Bye bye. Cheers.